good. Ending times are Jewish Standard Time, but we try very hard. For today, instead of a formal study session, I had been asking for several months. I put out a call for anyone who had a passage, whether it was from Tanakh, whether it was a passage from rabbinic tradition, whether it was from a modern source, of something that inspired you or helped you get through the pandemic and to this moment. So 2 people have found something that had inspired them this 18 months, or at least shared it. So I'm going to share those responses, and then Rabbi Light and I are each going to share a passage that speaks to us, and then we'll see where we're at that point. So the first response I got was actually from you, Lois. Thank you so much. And I was actually very moved and inspired. Lois, every day of the pandemic, following each day after she davened in the morning, she would recite every morning after finishing davening, as another day begins to start, I love you, God, with all my heart. Please keep our family safe and strong, morning, night, and all day long. So beautiful. What a beautiful, private, personal meditation that you wrote, but shared and put forth to God each and every day. I am so moved, and I'm so grateful that you shared it with us. And I hope others are inspired to be like Lois and Hannah that we read yesterday, to find your voice in prayer, to put out your concerns to God, and to share your hopes. It's such a beautiful piece. The other one I got was from Mark Rich, who had a quote from John Katz that is really based on the fact that Hagrid has come into Mark's life. Hagrid is Mark's dog. And I certainly can relate, because when we moved out to, a couple months after we moved out to the desert, Stephen and I also got a dog. We got a Morkie, part Maltese, part Yorkshire Terrier. Her name is Crystal Leia. So Hagrid and Crystal Leia, some of you have seen them on Zoom. But in any event, this is the quote that Mark shared that he really found meaningful during this time. Animals have come to mean so much in our lives. We live in a fragmented and disconnected culture. Politics are ugly, religion is struggling, technology is stressful, and the economy is unfortunate. What's one thing that we have in our lives that we can depend on? A dog or a cat loving us unconditionally every day, very faithfully. I found that to be so beautiful and so true. Any of you who have had pets probably know that they are not just pets, they are family members and really treasured gifts that God offers, the possibility of friendship and unconditional love that we can actually learn from our pets, that we could do it better if we were more like the love that our pets actually provide. You know, they don't usually, when we say good morning to them, they don't respond snarkily. They usually wag their tail and are ready. So I found that to be beautiful. And now I thought I'd ask Rabbi Light if you wanted to share your quote or your passage.
So I actually have two passages that I've kind of been going through my thoughts during the month of Elul, and I've been kind of wondering a lot of the time how they fit together. And I think I have an idea, and it starts with a question of where does God become manifest for me? Where do I see God in my life, and where might I, if I'm trying to emulate God, where can I step up as well? And so Rosh Hashana, like Rabbi Sachs said, yesterday is very much about crowning God as king. And the coronation ceremonies that we all know of, either from films or from books that we've read, are filled with pomp and process, rites and rituals that, if we get it wrong, there are consequences to play. And we know of these rites and rituals and the consequences of them from, of course, the story of Nadab and Abihu, when the Mishkan is being consecrated, and even in their great fervor and enthusiasm, they step up and they rush forward to basically say, we want to show our love in a different way, right? They go off script, and they are in some way punished for doing so. And so this idea of things very much according to process, fits in very, very well with this idea of Rosh Hashana being the creation of the world as well, with this kind of orderly, systematic way of doing things. And so I was shocked to kind of find these two quotes that were resonating mostly with me, were very much showing God's presence in very out of order or very unexpected kind of ways. And so the first comes from Psalm 27, which we've been reciting, and you've heard us sing the Achad Sha'alti Me'et Hashem. And the phrase that struck me in this psalm was the phrase that says, Ki avi v'imi ya'azvuni, Adonai ya'asfeni. So when my father and my mother abandon me, God will gather me in. And I know of relationships where children have to move away from their parents, away from their kind of the ideology of their parents, away from the presence of their parents sometimes, in order to feel like they can grow and not be in the shadow of their parents. But the bonds between a parent, when it comes to a parent and a child, and in that direction, that seems to me like that kind of pet love that you were just talking about, this kind of unconditional love. And in a way, to think about a moment where a parent turns their back on their own child, a parent stops loving in a way that it just didn't seem like that can be. How can that be? How can that, even a parent who expresses anger or disapproval, the idea of stopping, of abandoning their child, that just seems beyond the pale of the way things biologically are and in life are. And so at that moment, God kind of says, I'm swooping in, and I am making sure to be the ultimate stopgap, that someone, when they're feeling ultimately abandoned, will never feel abandoned. And so I take that quote, and then the other quote that strikes me so powerfully is from the words that we just read of Hana Tiferet, this idea of Hashivenu Hashem v'nashuva. I understand this idea, from this famous idea from who's our poet, that I take 2 steps towards you, God, and I see you coming out to see me. He said, my heart is in the east, but
Yehuda Levi.
Yehuda Levi, right, says this famous quote, I take 2 steps to you, God, and I see that you're coming towards me. And that makes sense to me, that our first move has to be towards God, and then God is ready to kind of see us and say, I'm here for you as well. And yet the prayer Hashivenu Hashem v'nashuva is actually saying something very opposite to that. God, you push us towards you, and then we're going to step towards you. Actually, so God is making the first steps towards us rather than us towards God, which seems to me completely out of order. It seems to me that we should actually be the ones making the initiative, and God is there to kind of push us forward. And so again, we see, if I take these two quotes together, it kind of, it reminds me that, well, maybe that's where God is. That God is not above leaving the way things normally are. That God is not too arrogant and so all-powerful that God is not willing to say, I need to give you a little push, to give you a little nudge. And then by helping you turn towards me, you're going to also see that I'm there for you. And so in both these cases, the case of the parent who turns their back on their child, God saying, that's not the way things are done, I'm here. And God saying, I'm not too large to say, this is the way things are done, and so I have to stand back. I'm going to kind of break the norms, break tradition, break protocol, go off script, and come towards you, even though that's not often the way of a melech, even though that's not often the way of a master of the world. That by limiting myself, that by lessering myself, I'm going to build relationship. And so what has pushed me forward during these months of Elul is to say, look for those moments when things are off script. Look for moments where things are not necessarily towards the normal way, Rabbi, like that you see the world as running. And it's those moments you need to step forward, because not only are you going to find that those are the moments where there's work to do, but those are the moments where you see God's presence as well. Shkoach.
And I had a passage that I found from the Likutei Halachot, or actually the Likutei Moharan. It's from Rav Nachman of Bratslav. And usually my focus is really on how each of us can find our way. And it was a passage that I really had not studied before, really looked at much, but it says, V'chol echad v'echad miYisrael yesh bo bechinat tzadik moshel. Each and every one of us possesses an aspect of a tzaddik. And he quotes, Rabbi Rav Nachman quotes Isaiah, which says, Amcha Yisrael kulam tzadikim. All of us are tzadikim. Oftentimes, that's also contrary as in some ways as Rabbi Light's passages were maybe counterintuitive or not what you'd expect. We usually approach High Holy Days and we're told to work on our things that are less than becoming or less than full. And that's a good thing to do, that we should all do cheshbon nefesh. But maybe the starting place should be is that we all have an aspect of tzaddik in us. We all are that aspect of righteousness, that we are so filled with potential for goodness, for justice, for love, for kindness, for being a tzaddik, and that we are part of a community of tzaddikim, right? That Isaiah points to. That is, I don't live in a vacuum in my pursuit to being a better person, but I actually have people around me who are models for me in different ways, different people in different ways, but are models for me and are supporters of my endeavors to grow. So I actually found that to be very, very heartening from Rav Nachman. I have a second passage, but it's from the Machzor. And before I did, I just wondered if there is anyone who had a passage from our Machzor that's touched you between our davening on Monday night or yesterday or today. If there's a passage that you didn't really think about much before but stood out to you this year, or something that you just always love and come back to because it really speaks to your heart. Does anybody have a passage from our Machzor that's speaking to you? You should be in dialogue with the Machzor. It's a good thing to do. Let it speak to you. You can speak to it. So my passage that I don't think I've actually paid much attention to it, actually, like ever until this year. And it is V'sa nes lekabetz galuyotenu. And I read it differently. It struck out to me because of the word nes. And we had talked about how the word for testing in the Akedah was nisa. But at the same time, the word nes means a banner, something that you can elevate. So the idea behind a test of life that Abraham and all of us face is that we have the potential, when we are faced with a challenge, to elevate ourselves and respond to that with dignity, grace, with perspective in the way we respond. And then we can wave the banner, I got through this. And I'm sort of proud of myself. I actually got through it in a really, really good way. I've been getting through this pandemic. And I feel for the most part, I've done it well. We can feel proud of ourselves as a community. We can raise that banner. L'kibbutz galuyotenu. In this case, I'm hearing it this year as kibbutz gathering of galuyotenu, the scattered parts of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that we've exiled, our ability to be kind, we've sometimes exiled. On Twitter, when it comes to politics, or in our emails, we exile kindness and go for incivility and rudeness, as if that's some sort of mark of righteousness, right? We put down people who are immigrants or transgender or whatever for actually no reason at all, perhaps our own discomfort, and rather we can gather our kindness now back and get it back. V'sa nes lekabuyotenu will be lifted up. We'll from Laset, from Nasa, and we'll lift up that banner once we are able to gather in all the better parts of ourselves that we've let go for some reason. And with that thought, I think we're going to conclude our time together on speaking words of Torah, and we're going to continue because we do have a lot of Musaf davening to do. And I hope that you'll find things that inspire you in the remainder of the service.